literally a few weeks ago, is that if you look at the Household Integrated Economic Survey of 2007-8, which is the last survey, according to SPDC, the incidence of poverty had already approached 37% by 1998. The government figure for that period was 17%. So there is a big difference between what civil society is telling us and what the government numbers are saying. And if you allow for the fact that over the last 3 years, the crippling inflation, particularly in food prices, it is quite likely that we have crossed the danger mark of 40 to 45% poor in Pakistan. 70 to 75 million people of Pakistan today are probably below the poverty line. These are numbers which indicate that unless something is done very quickly, we have the unfortunate prospect of a social breakdown. And it was really very surprising when I saw some of the numbers given on the socio-economic characteristics of female-headed households. Even though the sample size is small and there's bound to be a certain error in it, something like 50% of female-headed households are poor. I can understand that roughly 40% who are widows. But even otherwise, the percentage of poor female-headed households is as high already at 50%. Another very worrying statistic that comes out from the survey is that only 10% of the female-headed households are covered by the Benazir Income Support Program. This is a program dedicated to a great female leader of Pakistan, and is a program which is supposed to be targeting females. They are the prime beneficiaries. And yet, we are told that today the ISP covers about 40% of the poor households of the country. But according to the survey, the ISP is covering only 10% of female-headed households. Clearly, there are serious problems in targeting. And even though this is a small sample, it has led me to the conclusion that one of the recommendations of the two studies is that the time has probably come for civil society and independent research institutions to start looking at the targeting efficiency of the Benazir Income Support Program. And this is an exercise of great importance, given the fact that with rising levels of poverty and the unlikely prospect of rapid economic improvement, that poverty is acquiring a structural and chronic character, and we will need social safety nets which are effective in reaching the poor if we want to avoid a social breakdown. So I hope in the next round of research, Social Policy and Development Center, Mehboob Haq, Human Development Center, and others can collaborate on doing a combined joint third-party independent evaluation of the Benazir income support. What was reassuring, however, to me is that while my own optimism is wearing thin these days, I found that the female-headed households, the relatively poor female-headed households, really a very large percentage of them are inclined to think that the next 5 years will be better. I hope to God they're right. Because really, I find among my own students at the universities where I have the pleasure of lecturing, there's a great degree of demoralization that I see in Lahore. On the Zakat study, one number which I found very reassuring is that given the perceptions about failed governance and so on and so forth, the fact that we can even get a targeting efficiency of 75%, I think is an achievement. It's a damn good job. And you know, the Zakat institution is essentially, at least on paper, community-driven. Whereas the Benazir Income Support Program has relied on a very centralized system working through NADRA and so on. So it seems that the targeting efficiency of Zakat, even though it's a relatively small fund, is pretty good. And earlier research done by the World Bank also revealed that the Baitul Mal targeting efficiency was fairly good at about 80% or so. So it is reassuring that even when, as we hear stories about problems with governance, there is at least one small institution out there which is able to deliver 400 to 500 crores annually to the poor with a relatively high level of efficiency. Also, what I found very significant is that although these cash transfers in Pakistan are not conditional in character, like their Mexican or Brazilian counterparts, nevertheless, they do seem to have some impact, particularly when we focus on female-headed households. And even if the enrollment rate only of boys is going up, that itself to me is a significant advantage of targeting female versus male households. So I think the study makes a convincing case for increasing the share of female beneficiaries in the various social safety nets that we have today in Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just conclude by saying that institutions like the Social Policy and Development Center need more indigenous support. We have to now focus on mechanisms to ensure sustainability of these institutions through support from local institutions and local donors. It is extremely important that these independent think tanks of civil society, and I'm afraid, unfortunately for a large country like Pakistan, we have far too few of these institutions. These institutions must remain protected, nurtured, and be allowed to be an independent voice in public policy making in Pakistan. This is desperately needed. Finally, both Harun and Nadeem, the two authors, are students of mine. Let me say, I'm proud of what they've done. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending, and thank you to our esteemed panel. I hope you'll join us for high tea, which is served outside, and we have copies of the reports in the lobby. Thank you again.